Okay, so when did this even happen? It feels like we've just set foot in Fontaine and we're already about to play version 4.1. That's crazy, time flew by so fast this time. Since we got a new live stream introducing everything we're about to experience in a few days, it's time for a new detailed analysis video, but also some pretty juicy theories. As always, this is a theory video. I use information available in the game, but my theories and conclusions are not to be considered the official lore, unless I got something right and it's confirmed in the game itself. Also, if you want to talk about leaks, just remember that lots of people, me included, don't want to know them, so write leaks and then leave a few empty lines before writing. This way, if we don't want to read them, we can safely avoid them. With that being said, let's start with a detailed analysis of the trailer. So, it seems that this new Archon quest begins when Arlecchino's proposals to free Child were turned down in a meeting with Neuvillette, Furina, and I think also Wriothesley, since we hear him say,
"Time's up. Negotiations have broken down. Please leave, ladies and gentlemen."
Since Arlecchino is a harbinger and her repercussions can be very dangerous, Neuvillette decides to calm her down by convicting us with false charges so that we can be sent to the Fortress of Meropide to check up on Child. I guess we're finally going to prison after 3 years. The fortress is both a prison and a gathering place for exiles, and is filled with pipes, gears, and steam valves. We were also shown the lowest floor, where most of the convicts work to build mechanical devices of every kind, among which mecha. During these scenes, we hear a man telling us that there are hidden rules in this prison, which is pretty cliché since it means that there is a hierarchy among the convicts, but this also makes me think that something did happen to Child. If you think about it, he was never shown in the trailer, they didn't even mention his name at all, and what Paimon says about a mysterious box and a bottle of crimson liquid makes me think that this is all we're gonna find in his cell. We then see either sneaking around, spying on a group of guards, so we will either have to get somewhere without being seen, or we will have to gather info on some kind of secret organization and their plans. I think the latter makes more sense because Lini tells us that the Fatui sent some spies and informants, but they all vanished. We also see either strangely dizzy and about to lose consciousness, and this made me think that maybe at the beginning of the video, either and Paimon weren't simply sleeping, they were actually knocked out. We then hear a man saying that something is gonna happen at lunch on the third day, and we see a frightened man holding a gun at a mech and shoot. I don't know if what is gonna happen at lunch and this man are related, but still Wriothesley arrives, fights the mech and turns toward the scared guy. By the way, it's very strange that this guy, who is not a guard, is carrying a gun in the fortress. We hear another voice, probably the guy who told us about the hidden rules, saying that there are some pipes that make strange sounds and that we should never go near them at night. I guess we all know where we're going that same night. Then the camera travels through some pipes and we get to the entrance, which is, like the entire fortress, underwater. Right outside, we see another building that looks like a production facility of some sorts, and then we are shown a sunken building with golden accents that gives off Remuria vibes. During this scene, we hear Lini saying that Wriothesley has some kind of plan, so he may be aware that something is happening behind his back. Next, there's Fremene, who once again is talking about something he needs to do, just like his mission in the overture, and is slowly sinking and losing consciousness. He is of course not drowning, since vision holders can breathe underwater in Fontaine. Then the scene completely changes. We see the ruins of the Fontaine Research Institute and we hear Arlecchino saying that we are now in the next stage of the prophecy, which is not good. I am entirely skipping basically everything that has to do with Neuvillette. He has a chapter and a disclaimer just for him in this video. Next, we hear a Melusine saying that they will find out why they were born, and we see a man shielding another Melusine. A man says that they were born from calamity and that they will bring danger to those around them. A woman says that they cannot be trusted and as a consequence Neuvillette too. And another man says that the only way for them to pay their debts is through bloodshed. While this last man is speaking, we also hear probably Eder and some other people shouting "Innocent, he's innocent." This is most likely part of Neuvillette's story quest, since it will revolve around his love for the Melusines, but also the fact that he protects them firsthand, since they're always targeted by criminals because of their essential role in the Marechaussee Phantom due to their powerful eyesight that they use to find evidence to present to court. If I had to guess, this feels like a trial in which the people are the prosecution, while Neuvillette and the Melusines are the defendants, and this may happen because the people don't know the truth behind Elena's, they only see the death he brought upon Fontaine. Learning that the Melusines are basically his children and seeing how Neuvillette favors them must have sparked some kind of rebellion. Interesting will be seeing who the judge will be during this trial. Maybe it's gonna be Furina, since we will be able to play this quest only after we're done with the Arkham quest. Skipping Neuvillette's scenes again, we hear Lini asking Wriothesley where he took his siblings. We then hear two other people speaking and neither of them is Wriothesley, so they're not actually answering Lini's question. The first man just says,
Even if the truth may not be pleasant.
but I have no idea what that means, while the second one, probably still the guy from the Hidden Rules, talks about disposing of some leftover remains and turning them into other forms to keep them in the fortress forever. Well, considering the fact that in the next scene we see Wriothesley running for his life with a wave of primordial water behind him, it's pretty obvious that someone is dissolving people in the Fortress of Meropide, and the strange sounds in the infamous pipe may be the souls of the dissolved people. Anyway, as Wriothesley is running, we also see Neuvillette arriving at the scene. We then hear Arlecchino reprimanding Furina for her inability to take actions, so this may have happened during the meeting we talked about at the beginning of the video. Then we see something like a veil expanding right before something came crashing in through a pipe, and we hear Furina begging for her life. Keywords here are "who are you?", so it's someone Furina doesn't know. As a consequence, it cannot be Arlecchino. I would love for it to be another Harbinger like Sandrone, as I said in my last video, but they would have shown such an important character in the trailer. Next is Eder and Paimon protecting themselves from a shockwave, most likely at the Research Institute, Arlecchino sitting on a sofa, the Chinu Fatui Harbinger who looks sick, Wriothesley is still running for his life, a strange device is hammering a stone or device from 4 different angles, the fortress safety doors shutting down, Wriothesley punching something, and finally Neuvillette stopping the wave of primordial water with his powers, while we hear a man shouting at the top of his lungs, asking Neuvillette if that is what justice means to him. Obviously, I'm also skipping the end of the video for now. Now that we're done with the trailer, let's talk for a second about Wriothesley and the Fortress of Meropide. Wriothesley is the administrator of the fortress. He is called the Duke, but he's also a former underground pugilist and someone who loves doing squats, it seems. When he took charge of the fortress, he changed it completely with a series of reforms, which is probably why now the criminals decide to stay there even after they serve their sentence instead of going back to society. There, as long as they work, they will earn what they need to sustain themselves, just like it's written on the insignia of the restaurant or cafeteria, those who do not work shall not eat, which is also repeated over and over again on the walls. Wriothesley's constellation is Cerberus, which is pretty fitting since in Greek mythology Kerberos is the three-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld, which is also reflected by the fact that his constellation symbol, that looks a little too much like the Witcher's pendant from the game, is pretty much everywhere on the walls, but especially on the main huge gate. He is also the first cryo catalyst user, which finally puts an end to the strange belief that the Tsaritsa was going to be the only cryo character in the game who uses a catalyst. Wriothesley is also known to protect the vulnerable, which would explain him saving the scare guy and put troublemakers in their place either by talking with his mouth or with his fists. Interestingly, the title of his banner is Lord Incognito of the Murky Depths, and this makes me think that he knows exactly what's going on behind his back in the fortress, and the fact that he is there together with the most unusual and unique Melusine, Zigavina, who is acting as a head nurse, sounds even more like he's there to put an end to whatever is happening. Lini did say that he has a plan, so this may be it. When it comes to the Fortress of Meropide, we already saw that it's built completely underwater, but what's very interesting is that it works outside Fontaine's legal system. Neuvillette can send people there during trials, but once they're there, he can't do anything anymore, which is the reason why he had to convict us with false charges to send us there, but also why Yanfei told us that if we ended up in the fortress, we would have been beyond saving, even with her expertise. Since Dawei and Hale said in unison, serial disappearance of young women, and we also saw a wave of primordial water, I think it's pretty clear what's happening in the fortress. As to how the water got there, I can only think that someone we know may have brought it. Okay, let's leave the fortress behind and let's talk about the Research Institute of Fontaine. The Research Institute of Kinetic Energy Engineering, as we all probably know, was founded by Alain Guillotin 400 years ago, specifically after Marianne's death inside of Elena's, but also when Neuvillette became the new Iudex and the Opera Epiclese was being built. I'm saying this because, if you're curious, in my last video I proposed the idea that the Oratrice was actually built by Alain Guillotin. Anyway, a few years ago, a researcher called Edwin Eastinghouse created an experimental field generator that was supposed to counteract the effects of gravity to prevent another flood from taking countless lives again. I mean, if Fontaine relocated in the sky, they'd be safe from floods. Eastinghouse used a special material called archium that was once thought to be the key to Fontaine's salvation, which may or may not be the strange glowing green stone we saw in the scene, but things went very wrong and the entire institute was destroyed. The results of the failed experiment are pretty obvious. We now have these cubes of water that defy gravity called allogravity condensed water bodies. I guess that Archium must have pulled the water from the lake below, which then enveloped the ruins of the institute. Today, the experimental field generator is still operational somewhere among the ruins and it is the new world boss, but what's interesting is that the Fatui, specifically the ones working under Arlecchino, infiltrated the ruins to gather intel. Lastly, Archium not only changed the landscapes above ground but also underwater. Near the Fortress of Meropide, there is a secret underwater cave in which we will find some strange lifeforms and vegetation born from the interaction of Archium with the original biology of Fontaine. This also means the Fortress of Meropide is going to be very close to the Research Institute, so it's not the huge tower we see near the Opera Epiclese. Okay, now let's go back to the trailer and talk about everything I've skipped. While Neuvillette is using his powers to stop the primordial water, we hear a voice saying,
"You will see much in the human world, from the delightful to the depressing. And one day, when you have dwelt among humanity long enough, you will be placed to bring judgment over all as a spokesperson for Fontaine's past."
So the problem is, who is the one speaking? Well, initially I was 100% sure it was Egeria, since it sounded like the voice actress from the Overture video, but I was told in the community tab that the voice belongs to Furina, and after hearing it carefully both in English and in Japanese, it is actually Furina. I mean, I heard Hestia-sama speaking a little bit too much in Danmachi not to recognize her voice. The problem here is that what Furina says is very out of character for her. Even when she was serious during the Vacher trial, she still didn't sound as wise, gentle, and above all, motherly as in this video. So what's going on? Well, it's obvious that it is Furina, but I also don't think it's her. I know it doesn't make sense, but there are three options in my mind. Option 1, Nabu Malikata's prophecy hasn't been fulfilled yet. In the statement of Hvarena's origin, Nabu Malikata told Hvarena that the Lord of Sweet Dew, the Hydro Archon, and the Lord of Grass and Trees, Rukkhadevata, were going to be forgotten. Rukkhadevata was indeed erased from people's memories, but people still remember Egeria, which means that she is also supposed to face the same end, meaning that Furina would be assigned a new past in which she is the only Hydro Archon ever existed. Before you head to the comment section, I don't think this is going to be the case, although the prophecy will have to be fulfilled somehow. Furina has a unique personality. Her childish, bratty, influencer behavior is not what we expected from the God of Justice or from an Archon in general, but it's also what makes her unique, so it cannot be changed, no one would accept it. Also, when Rukkhadevata was erased from Irminsul, Nahida's personality didn't change at all, so Furina wouldn't go from childish to motherly as well. Option 2. Egeria's consciousness took over Furina's body and spoke to Neuvillette. Honestly, I wouldn't exclude this possibility, because I still think the Oratrice has a piece of Egeria's consciousness inside, so maybe she felt the need or had to intervene and use what powers she had left to be able to tell Neuvillette why he's been put there as a judge. We saw in the past that consciousnesses can inhabit objects like Makoto and A and their Muso no Hitotachi, and we actually witnessed the consciousness of a dead being, Urakusai, possessing the traveler's body. Option 3, and this is actually the theory I believe the most. It is simply Furina saying Egeria's words. I'm bringing this theory to the table because what she said in the trailer is more or less identical to the legend from the ancient natural history excerpts we found in the Institute of Natural Philosophy. The legend talks about Egeria shedding a tear from which an oceanid was born. Egeria wanted this oceanid, born from the sea of life and capable of metamorphosis, to comprehend all forms of life, to etch the essence of living creatures into its being and yearn for life. Only when it had acquired enough understanding of humanity, it would have shed its first tear upon the earth. This legend sounded like Furina's origin story being Egeria's daughter, but what if she wasn't talking about her? What if she was actually talking about Neuvillette? My ideas here are two. Either Furina is remembering those words, thinking that Egeria was talking about her, but instead she was talking about Neuvillette, or this is also part of Neuvillette's story quest. And this is what the oratrice will write in the sentence that Furina will read as the temporary judge of the trial against Neuvillette. Now you have to remember that legends by definition are stories based on real events, but that slowly changed over time, turning into fantastical tales. This means that only part of them can be considered valid. For example, we know that the being from the legend was not the first ever oceanid because they have existed way before Remuria was even founded. But if this is talking about Neuvillette, well, we would need to carefully consider the concept of first ever being. Of course, this takes me to the next and final chapter of this video. What is Neuvillette? This chapter has a disclaimer of its own because I know that whatever I'm gonna say here is not what you are expecting me to say. This is simply a theory I came up with, and I am not trying to convince you, nor am I remotely pretending that what I'm saying is the truth. If you don't agree and you want to share your own theory, that's okay, that's the whole point of this channel. And I am always discussing your theories with you in the comment section to actually understand them. But after recurring events, I now feel the need to ask you not to try and force your theories on me. You know, just be respectful, that's all I'm asking. Now that this second disclaimer is over, I'll say it right away. I don't think Neuvillette is a water dragon lord. Okay, now if you didn't click out of the video, I'll explain why. I've read multiple people say he just looks like the water dragon, as if we had any kind of indication of what a water dragon is even supposed to look like, especially when the three dragons we met are so different one another that they don't even have a common feature or characteristic that we can use as a reference. I've also read that he has to be the water dragon because he has horns. Now, ignoring the fact that many characters have horns in this game and they're not dragons, I understand that Yanfei's antlers move a little, so horns are not necessarily rigid like Ganyu's, but then again, how exactly do these two things look like horns? They are extremely flowing, almost like hair strands, and in his elemental state, they extend even further, they are even more flowing, and they are similar to the elemental extensions of his clothes, which remind me of Nahida's clothes during her elemental burst, by the way. Now let's talk about what we actually learned about him. When Neuvillette goes in his special elemental attack, he forms a Triquetra seal, which is a symbol that is basically everywhere in Teyvat. One of his idle animation is him making it rain around him, while the other one has to do with his unique hobby, tasting spring water from all over Teyvat. Neuvillette puts his impartiality before everything in his life. That's why he doesn't have personal relationships nor collaborations outside standard legal procedures. His story quest is called Diluvies, which means downpour or flood in Latin, and the name of a 5-star story quest is usually the name of their constellation, but in this case it feels pretty weird. I might be reading too much into this, but wouldn't it be strange that his constellation was a flood? I wonder how they're gonna draw it as a symbol though. Also, something extremely worrying is that Neuvillette is shown walking around the core of Fontaine during a rainy day, but there's no one around. The people seem to have disappeared or dissolved, just like the prophecy says. Though the scene is in black and white, or actually sepia, so I guess it's a vision of the future that was shown to Neuvillette or a nightmare he's having. I mean, the prophecy cannot be fulfilled for obvious reasons. Something also extremely interesting is both the fact that he is incapable of expressing his feelings because he doesn't actually understand what he is, and his love for the Melusines, which sounds like the only personal preference he has in his life, but there may be also something more behind it. Not only did he find them as soon as they were born, he also taught them about society and brought them to Fontaine once they were ready, and he protects them firsthand as we saw before. The fact that he is extremely attached to these new life forms feels to me like he sees himself in them, meaning that they may share something in their origin story, even if only the fact that they came to life in an unconventional or unexpected way. I'm saying this because I now think Neuvillette is something like a hybrid being that wasn't supposed to be able to be born, something completely outside the ordinary. As for what he actually is, let's start with something I said in my 4.0 Fontaine analysis. Remuria fell when the Dragon King Scylla and the Fell Dragon Prince rebelled together with the native people of the land. Now, Scylla is considered a dragon, more specifically the king of a race of beings born of the sea that are defined as dragons. What's interesting is that Scylla recruited bishops to fight against Remuria, but also that Egeria is said to have felt great sympathy for dragons. I know that you already guessed where I'm going with this and you probably think I'm crazy, but yes, I do think that Neuvillette may be Egeria and a dragon's son. Something that shouldn't be possible, especially since oceanids don't even reproduce through mating. As for what the dragons are, I think it is possible that they are descendants of the original Hydra bishops, which may be different from those we met in Enkanomiya because of Orobashi's experiments, but still, guess what? Do you see those things above their eyes? They look very similar to whatever it is that Neuvillette has on his head, and those are definitely not horns. If I had to give them a name, I would say that they look more like eyebrows actually. On the other hand, Neuvillette doesn't have a tail, and the flowing things that appear in his elemental state look a lot, and by a lot I mean a lot, like the oceanid's tails. What also may be proof in favor of my theory is the fact that he can create source water droplets, just like the Hydra Traveler, and we know that the Traveler's elemental skills are always based on the Archons. Anemo and Geo skills are more or less the same as Ventis and Zhongli's, while Electro and Dendro are vaguely similar, but I think that's because the statues we're receiving our powers from are the statues of the original Archons, not the current ones, so our skills are more similar to the original ones rather than their substitutes. This theory takes me straight back to my first ever theory about what Neuvillette was. Back then I thought that Fontaine was gonna have three gods, Egeria, Furina and Neuvillette, who represent the three, let's say, faces of justice. Neuvillette is the judge, Furina is the jury, and Egeria, now represented by the Oratrice, is the executioner. Then, when we were finally able to go to Fontaine, the first thing I wanted to see was Coppelius and Coppelia dancing because they are just wonderful and sometimes I still go there just to watch them. What I noticed, and it's very interesting, are these three massive and extremely important looking seats. Now, something like that simply screams there are three main important people in this nation, and I guess I may have been right all along. Well, half right, since Neuvillette would still be half bishop. And that's it, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and if you're interested in Genshin Impact Theory videos, consider subscribing. I can't wait to play version 4.1 and see if I even got something right with all these theories, and luckily we don't even have to wait that long. Well then, I'll be waiting for your theories in the comment section to discuss them together with you. Thank you for watching, and until next time, over and out. But above all...